Thanks for staying with us. This is Daybreak, and much appreciated for your company. Canon Evans Omolo from the All Saints Cathedral is with us this morning. Dr. Makali Mulu and his counterpart from Muriri Maknyamita, we also joined this morning by FCPA Bilokero. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time. Canon, coming to you. Last year, at a time like this, the debate was heated, generated by the proposals contained in the now dead Finance Bill 2024. Before we come to the details and get the sound bites of the control of budget, what, in your view, in the 2025 Finance Bill stands out for you, and from what perspective are you looking at this?
Yeah, thanks, Ayub, and my colleagues here. I'll make a few comments around the Finance Bill 2025 and maybe digress a little into into the budget estimate. So, one, you realize one of the things that has made Kenya very unfavorable in terms of doing business and stimulating economic growth at the grassroots is the tax regime. I think our fiscal policies do not favor so much production. Many times we think that service industry holds the backbone of our country. No, we have agriculture, you have manufacturing. And therefore, Finance Bill 2025, I think, hugely disadvantages production in this country. If you look at what the Kenya Association of Manufacturers has presented before the Finance and Planning Committee, is that the tax regime for importing inputs to manufacture locally goes all the way up to 65%. That means, in the proposal as we have, because there are introductions of new taxes, including import tax and all that, that means that the cost of production goes high, consequently goods become extremely high, and what then happens? That the Mwananchi are not able to afford, and that companies are not able to be profitable. What consequently we see are companies either downsizing or shutting down or relocating to our neighboring countries. Ayub, one of the things that this Finance Bill 2025 must address, and I'm glad these gentlemen from the August House are here, is the tax regime as far as importation and manufacturing is concerned. Manufacturing opens a huge doorway for growth of the economy. Look at people who are employed. When they're employed, then you're able to net tax in terms of pay, in terms of VAT, because I can be able to go and spend that money. When that is stifled, then that will not grow. A minimum, I'll put at a very conservative figure, a minimum of 24 companies have relocated from Kenya. An example is Cadbury's, who is now operating its main plant in Egypt. Only left Kenya for distribution. What does that mean? That means that we lost jobs, we've lost opportunity for more money to circulate and for spending. And therefore, for me, my call as we progress towards closing the budget estimates and zeroing in on the finance bill is to review that. But as I sign off, I have not seen very clearly the current budget estimates articulating how the tax we collect will contribute to creation of jobs. The report that was presented the other day estimates that 786,000 jobs were created, but there is no linkage as to how that comes from the taxation. 786,000. 786,000 jobs were created, but no one tells us that this budget will contribute to creation of jobs in this level. And I would wish that such breakdowns are arrived at so that the young people who are struggling to get jobs, the mama mbogas who are struggling to get money circulate to grow, are salvaged. Otherwise, we are facing a near depression of our economy.
So what you're citing is the Economic Survey report of 2025, that is?
Exactly.
Of the jobs created?
Of the jobs created.
782,000.
So I would love from my end, as a religious leader, as a member of this country, to see a clear breakdown of how many jobs are going to emanate from these budget estimates, whether in the agriculture sector, in manufacturing, in the service industry, across the board.
And what was verifiable of that number was only 78,600 reported in the formal sector. So we'll be talking and expounding more about that. FCPA below, looking at the Finance Bill 2025, it proposes a cleanup of the second schedule of on zero rating, for example. But ideally, Provost also mentions the question of consistency in our taxation regime, very high on the VAT here. What should be the standard practice here, especially for businesses and investors?
You know, the VAT, value-added tax, seems to be the easiest tax the government collects. And in the last few years, they have been making every effort to try and get all the goods and services, all activities literally, being brought under VAT. And I think this pressure seems to have been coming from the IMF in particular, all the way from when they introduced the 16% VAT on the petroleum products to now trying to, remove all the zero-rated goods from the schedule and putting them into exempt. And the impact really, at the end of the day, what the government is trying to do is avoid a situation where they will not be able to, or they will be in a position to provide, for example, refunds, or allowing, institutions or companies to offset the VAT that is charged on them to the VAT output that they will charge. But I think for me the main concern is that when you're looking at any of these proposals, there's always an implication on the cost of living, because it has an impact on the price of goods and services. And if the government does not really look at that, then you worsen the situation. You're looking for opportunities, yes, to raise taxes, but you're making the lives of the same Kenyans whom you want to try and address their well-being and their development. You're affecting, it is impacting on the cost of living. And this is something that government does not seem to be looking at. Not only on tax, by the way, but every policy the government introduces, they must always take a pen and check what is the impact on the cost of living, what is the impact in terms of job creation that's raised, what is the impact on businesses, the cost of the competitiveness. And this is one of the reasons why you find that explanation about business leaving in Kenya is because of the competitiveness. It becomes very expensive. I am in business. It's becoming so expensive to manufacture goods in this country because of the many taxes and levies that have to be paid to government. And each of them has an impact. You're simply loading onto the cost of production of that item, making it so expensive. So I think VAT, yes, we made a decision many years ago that indirect taxes are better, and less painful than direct taxes on salaries and so forth. So, but I think the way we are going is we're getting to a situation where it's going to, you're loading costs onto price of goods and services and making it more expensive for Kenyans. And what about
Mark Nyamita, what does this rationalization pattern then mean? Zero-rated category now, as Bello says, exempt. Doesn't this then again become the standard rate category where VAT now will be imposed and then that cost pushed onto the consumer, therefore affecting the cost of life, which makes it beyond the reach of many Kenyans who are struggling economically at the moment?
Ayub, allow me to take a bit of a positive look into the finance bill for this year. That let's first appreciate that there has been a genuine attempt at trying to address the concerns that were raised by Kenyans following the now dead 2024-2025 finance bill that really led to the protests that we saw in the magnitude they came in. The biggest cry, and I agree with my good friend here, Mheshimiwa Kero, that for the only thing that will make sense to Kenyans is when they have money in their pockets, is when the cost of living is actually being brought down. Forget about all the numbers and the jargons that we may be able to be speaking about in all the forums that we have. Number one, for the salaried individuals, there's been an attempt to bring back money to the payslip using this finance bill. One is per diem is no longer being taxed, so at least they've raised the ceiling from about 2,000 to 10,000. So that means then people who are salaried, who are getting in that money, they can have a bit more money in their pocket. There was also the issue of, you remember the controversial housing levy?
Yeah.
Before it used to be put on the gross pay. Now it is actually on the base, therefore allowing some money back on the pay slip. There is an issue on mortgage. If I take interest on mortgage, now, I get a bit of relief on my pay slip, putting back a bit more money on the people who are actually earning. On the other side, now, if you think about...
So that's on the part of salaried Kenyans?
Yes, that's for the parts of salaried Kenyans.
Yeah.
Because you see there's been...
How much, for example, in the gross aspect of the housing levy that you have talked about, then ends up as part of the disposable income in a Kenyan's pocket?
You'd know that the housing levy is 1.5%. So before, it was on your gross pay. And you know, your gross pay was, you know, your basic pay plus all allowances. So if my gross pay is 100,000, my allowances is 50,000, it was 1.5 or 150,000. But now it is actually going to be applied on the basic pay, which is 100,000. So, you know, 1.5% of 100,000 and 1.5% of 150,000 is different. Someone gets to save about 7,500 if my quick math.
1.5% of 150,000, that's 2,250.
Okay.
And 1.5% of
100,000 is 1,500.
1,500 shillings.
Yeah. So there's a difference. So there's been that attempt, because anyway, it was wrongly placed. You can't do a housing levy including on all my allowances. And I was talking about that, you know, now
so per diem 750 Kenya shillings.
Yes. Number 3, the issues, for example, with gratuity.
For the average family, Honda Nyamita, just on the specifics, because we talked about the value of the shilling in the Kenyan pocket, what today in the current economic environment would, for example, 750 Kenya shillings?
No, that's just an example. Yeah. That's just an example. I'm just, and you know, the same Kenyans, you know, I mean, it is 1,500 that they were getting out. And you would argue, what would 1,500 make a difference in anyone's life today? But they were complaining when it was taken away, meaning it has a difference. So if you get back some of it, then it makes some sense. Number 3, I wanted to talk about, for example, gratuity. So if I have worked on contract for a period of time and I get my gratuity after service, remember during that whole time has been taxed. There was a taxation, you were to be taxed on your gratuity. Now this particular finance bill is actually knocking that off. Our pensioners,
okay.
There was also taxation on pension. So actually now giving them back money. So I'm just trying to say that there's been a genuine attempt at trying to put money back in the pockets, and that's for the salaried ones. Now, for the ones who are not, which is the majority of Kenyans, you know, the ones who have not, who don't have jobs, what is it that is actually happening? And that's now maybe what we need to, as this finance bill is coming
yes.
on the floor of the House, what are the changes, and as we take it through public persuasion. But one of the things that stood out for me, in the previous finance bill, there was an interest that was slapped for imported, for example, steel that was coming into the country. So they raised it to almost 17.5%, ostensibly to discourage imports of steel from outside and to encourage local manufacturing, which I think the provost was actually speaking to. But it was found to be a bit counterproductive, because the only people who had the capacity to do that local production apparently was maybe 1 or 2 players in the market who were also playing on both sides. So they were both in manufacturing and they were also in the retail of it. So there was a bit of competition. So therefore you find, like, for example, the cost of roof cover went extremely high. You know, we used to have a typical 3 meter would be going, normal corrugated iron sheet would going for about 1,300. It hit colored. It would go from about 900 shillings, it got to almost 2,000.
Okay.
So when they have now actually reduced it, is so that it can enable other people. If you walk around this country, if you go to Kisumu, if you come to Kisii, if you go to Nakuru, Eldoret, there were small industries that were beginning to be set up for manufacture of iron sheets. And they were actually kicked out of business when we raised that to 17.5%. So when it has been brought down to 5%, they will still import raw materials. But now the final cost to the consumer is actually going to be lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Makali, it's still on the same, and some of course, these issues came before the committee that you belong to. But ideally then from zero rated to exempt, doesn't this again bring in the question of the cost of the import here, which will be transferred to the consumers? Ideally then, which moves us to the standard rate category, which attracts the 16% VAT.
Yeah, thank you, Ayub. Let me explain that issue of zero rating and exempt, and then I'll come back to the issues I wanted to say.
Okay.
You know, if you move a good from zero rating to tax exempt, what it means that when a good is zero rated, it means you don't pay VAT, but after that, any VAT on the input, you can claim, and the KRI will reimburse you. When you tax exempt, it's only that you don't pay the VAT, but then you don't claim VAT on input. So what would happen? The VAT on input would more likely be pushed to the consumer. So you have an issue of prices increasing. Because initially, if you claim it back, it means then you can reduce the price of the good. But if you don't claim the VAT on inputs, then automatically that must be pushed to the consumer. And I think that's what the Kenyans are saying. They are concerned because a number of items have been moved from zero rating to tax exempt. And normally that would push prices up. But really the issues, and that's why you see, this issue of zero rating has also been, I think the problem is the integrity issues. Because what has happened is that if you look at the claims being pushed to KRA for payment, actually it has become easier, Ayub, to hire a good accountant who can do a good job in terms of claiming the VAT on inputs. Even you make more money by those claims than even production. So at times, if we had a very good system where people are honest and people would claim what is supposed to be claimed, I think we might be able to retain this. But what has happened over time? Yeah. There has been a lot of what I would call fake claims. People being very smart in claiming the VAT on input. And that's where there's a gap, but all said and done. To me, I think the way I look at this, you know, Kenyans, we take so much time on the finance bill. And I think the other day I was challenging the Kenya private sector. I don't know whether our senator here is a member of that KEPSHA, Private Sector Alliance. I was challenging them, telling them, if you look at the time they spend on analyzing finance bill, if you look at the time spent by the think tanks to analyze the finance bill, and you look at the time they spent to unpack the budget, you'll be surprised. Because finance bill is supposed to finance the budget. Currently, the current finance bill, because of what my colleague Nyamita is saying, because there was a deliberate move to reduce taxation to Kenyans, I think it's targeting to raise about either between 24 billion, between 24 and 40. Yeah. Okay, on paper they're saying 24, but when you look details to it, it's like to raise about 40 billion. Now, if you look at the other side, the expenditure side, today I've just scanned this paper, and by scanning this paper quickly, you can see there are about 3,000 ghost workers on the universal health care. There's about 6.5 billion being paid for commitment fees for loans being not drawn. So I'm saying, if we took a bit of time and we did unpack the budget expenditure items, maybe there will be not for finance bill this year. I can tell you. Okay. And we could easily raise the 24 billion by saying this doesn't make sense, remove it from the budget, by saying this doesn't make sense, remove it from the budget. But to me, the two issues which are coming out, which are contentious in the current finance bill, is the issue of moving items from zero rating to tax exempt, because they're likely to push prices up. And the other one is the issue of the data, which KRA wants to collect. The issue of accessing what they are calling secret data, private data. Those are the two issues which are sticking out. But I'm happy that now, from today, Kenyans are going to be subjected to a public participation where they can bring out these issues. I'm looking at it from any budget. Anytime you analyze a budget, you analyze it from about three perspectives. The first perspective is, what impact does it have to business, the private sector, the businesses? Okay. The second perspective is, what impact does it have to the common mwananchi? And then the third perspective is, what impact does it have now to the political class, the so-called the executive? Because there are budgets which are politically right for the executive. So that at the end of the day, politics is being played.
Okay.
So to me, I think these are the issues we should be debating.
Okay.
But all said and done, I think really, I must accept that this time we are not raising 400 billion from using the finance bill. We are raising between 24 and 40, which all said and done is a bit is the right step in the right direction in terms of ensuring that our taxation does not push Kenyans to a situation where they have no money to spend.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think our spiritual leader here did say it. If you have no money in the pocket, the economy will shrink.
Yeah.
You like it or not?
Which brings us to the inflation question and spending outside budget. So, Provost and Bello, coming to you on this, we have this soundbite of the control of budget who appeared in Parliament last week on Friday on spending outside the budget. This is what Dr. Margaret Nyakango had said on matters regarding the expenditure outside budgeting and some of the requests made through Article 223 of the Constitution.
Because a lot of times we are being messed by surprise requirements. For instance, you've heard of Article 223. Just when we have collected enough from KRA to pay something, to pay the pensions, you know what happens? I find 6 requests for Article 223. People need to spend outside the budget. And they need it now, today. That is what Article 223 means. So, what it is telling us is that our cash flow forecasting is thrown into disarray. Whatever we planned to do cannot be done at the time when it was intended. So we should not be surprised to see that the pensions have not been serviced, because there are these surprise requirements that are coming in all the time.
Provost, first coming to you before I come to Bello. This is not surprising, is it, given the submissions made by the Honourable Lady and the Auditor General, Dr. Nancy Gathungu, on some of these requests which are made. And ideally, it should be concerning, is it, on how we go about our budgeting?
Exactly. And I think for me, the other issue that then sticks out from listening to her and listening to the many submissions that Kenyans are making, both as individuals, organizations, companies, etc., that there is a very big conversation around being driven from the government side, both from executive and from parliament, on generation of revenue. But we are not discussing how this money is being spent. And the citizens who are the financiers of this budget are not being involved on how this money is being spent. And you can hear then what you'd call expenditure that is unwarranted, or sometimes even careless, beginning to creep in. And these all together then end up crippling our economy. For me, I would wish to see a very clear tracking of this is what we had budgeted and this is how we are spending this money, so that how Kenyans spend their money is also a priority as much as the concerns of we need tax here, we need to tax here, and we need to tax there. If we do not keep our eye on that, and for me, people like Rose Njeri, who are being arbitrarily arrested for expressing her freedom and informing Kenyans on what I would boldly say that people who are responsible for have failed to do sufficiently about this budget process, hire such innovative Kenyans and let them help us to track how our monies are being spent. And you've just heard that. And it's not just about expenditure outside of what is budgeted for. Even in what is budgeted for, and Honorable Makali is here, even from a budget committee perspective, my desire is that details are presented from ministries, departments, and authorities explaining how budget estimates that they're requesting are going to be spent, so that we use that as a tracker that you presented this, and this is how this money is being spent later. You heard the World Bank raise concerns about per diems on international trips. We are paying nearly 40% more than the average that is paid even by mature democracies out there. And therefore, Ayub, our major concern in this country is the careless expenditure and and the untamed appetite for money. And when you see that coming from people who should be guarding those resources, then it should concern you. From a governance perspective, just to digress a little, I would be very concerned that every now and again, you see all these monies that are being paraded in Harambes in excess of 50 million shillings a month by one person. These are all parts of monies that are being drawn irregularly, or are being accessed irregularly, and they're being spent arbitrarily. Those monies, from where I sit as a community leader, can be consolidated and channeled towards improving the welfare of the people. The basic concern that this budget should address is the welfare of the people. Food, education, good shelter, access to health care. Those concerns can be addressed if we tame this careless expenditure that we are seeing.
Yes, Honorable Kero, are you surprised by Dr. Nyakango's submissions?
No. It's governments have always been crafty. When they are looking for money, they know that a certain activity will not be funded, that they will not get approval in Parliament. So what they would do is wait. Parliament takes 9 months. The process of budget making takes almost 9 months. So when the budget has been finalized and approved, 2 months later you find a supplementary. Under Article 2.3, they say, there was no funding for this activity, or it was not adequate. They knew that if they had asked for that money for that activity, they would not get it, because it's an activity that probably did not deserve to be funded. So what they would do is take the money and then take it to Parliament to regularize. But I think even if the Constitution allowed that, it was for emergencies, for something that, But Parliament has still the power to say, no, this was not necessary. This is not an emergency. Why would you spend this money? And discourage it and penalize. By the way, they can still penalize under the Public Finance Management Act. So I think it's unfortunate that this is a culture that has been there in all our governments, but I think it should be discouraged, particularly under the new Constitution. Parliament has the full mandate in terms of the budget process, really. They have a more leverage on the budget process than at any other time in the history of this country. So I think they should not allow it, really, because once you allow this, then there's no point of having Parliament approve budget. What's the point? You do a budget, then, 2 months afterwards, you find supplementary. Another 2 months later, another supplementary. Somebody will spend money. So I think it undermines the role of Parliament, and it undermines the whole process of budget making, and it's a way of getting money out that they would ideally not have been funded or appropriated for by Parliament.
Yeah, and Honorable Mark Nyamita, this coupled with the question of the recommendations to reduce wastage in, for example, on travels, billions spent on domestic and foreign travels. Are these quick fixes that, if they are given the adequate attention, can bring back some money into the economic pathway of the country?
Actually, let me say two things on one. When we say that the current finance bill is just going to raise between either 25 to 40 billion, like my colleague here says, my view was then that maybe the difference of the money they want to raise should actually come from austerity measures, including cutting on expenditure for travel, cutting on unnecessary expenditure on other things. Sitting in Parliament, I can tell you, like this Parliament, I don't know, maybe my good friend Makali Mulu has been traveling every other week. But I can tell you that there's been a bit of reduction in terms of the activities that we used to have as compared to last Parliament. And maybe my good friend here would agree with me. The executive needs to employ the same.
Which is not the case, because Nyakango also pointed out during that Friday session with Parliament that the first 9 months, more than 10 billion spent on... That's
what I'm saying. So the executive needs to also walk the talk. To actually be able to reduce on what we would call unnecessary expenditure. And the savings from which then can plug in the gap that we're actually talking about. Article 223 has actually is provided for in the Constitution. And, the executive can use it and, of course, present that expenditure to Parliament within 2 months when we're in session. But it has been abused, not only now, but even in the past. I remember during Uhuru's, there was this issue of the Turkana wind power project, whereby, there was almost in excess of over 10 billion that was actually drawn under Article 223. Honorable Makali Mulu would remember in the budget committee when it came, we actually rejected it twice. We actually rejected it twice, recommended sanctions to the cabinet secretary and the accounting officer, who then had actually approved, including Treasury. And it went on like that. I think it was only passed after a while. So I think the onus is really on us and as Parliament, that the expenditures under Article 223 should be subjected to extreme scrutiny, so that only things that are actually necessary that then they do. Because when you say that you can forfeit paying pensions and maybe pay for my travel, then, you know, that is not prudent use. So I think the onus is really on us. And we're looking forward to a report from the Budget Committee, even now as they come. What is it at the action? Because we can also take sanction the officers who actually go on approving. And it has actually been abused, because then it is almost like parallel budgeting. Because we budget the main one and we debate it on the floor of the House. But there, when you spend an Article 223, the Parliament becomes morticians. We are only talking to a process where the money has actually been spent. Yeah. So I think the executive and all arms of government, including the judiciary, needs to actually walk the talk. We reduce unnecessary expenditure and plug that money to where it is actually needed most. Okay. And Honorable Makali Mulu, one thing that also the bill proposes is deletion of the first schedule, which provides for the exemption of taxable goods for direct and exclusive use of equipment of specialized hospitals to now standard rated status. And now we are in the midst of the new healthcare model. Doesn't this, because many Kenyans are looking forward to the universal healthcare program, push up the cost of healthcare, given that we import all these pharmaceuticals largely and lab equipment that are used, including detergents?
Maybe before I come to that, you allow me to weigh in on this matter of 223, because I think it's one of the articles which has really caused a lot of problems to this country, matters public finance. You know, while I agree that our colleagues at Parliament can do much in terms of trying to see what has happened, I just want to give you a few examples of what we've done. Under 223, Parliament has said no to payment for Ruaraka land. But you realize the money had already been paid. So Parliament did not approve that payment. Parliament has said no to payment for maize flour. You remember the issue of the milling at some point, where there were large flour millers and the small-scale millers. We said no to that payment. Parliament did say no. You remember there was a compensation you were supposed to pay. I think some shares were supposed to be paid to somebody at Telecom. Telecom, yes. We said no. But now, the problem is, even after saying no, the money has already been paid, and this is a question the other general was asking us. You said no, but what next? So, you know, when you say no, it becomes an audit query, but it remains outstanding, because it means it will not be cleared from the government books, but all said and done, the money has already been paid. And these are the issues we need to discuss. So what we are saying, I think, is we need to move to the other stage, which is now the stage of sanctions. Thank you. For example, for those who paid the Ruaraka land under 223, and it was never approved by Parliament, should you not be seeing them in court, being subjected to the due process? So as Parliament, you have done your part. We've done our part. Which are the other institutions that ought to do their part as well? That's the question. And that's the Treasury. That's what the General was saying now. And I want to ask Kenyans, how many accounting officers have we seen in court? Or how many accounting officers have we seen being told by the executive that now that you're not able to account for this money, we are not giving you a budget this year? And this is an issue that we're just asking. Can we move to that level where we say, if by any chance we find you have misappropriated or misdirected public resources, and you're an accounting officer, the first thing before we even take you to court is you either vacate office or you'll have no budget for the next financial year. Because if you don't account for 100 million, the best thing would be the next budget, we should not be able to give you 100 million. We should reduce your budget by 100 million. If you started moving by that direction, Ayub, we'll be helping this country. But what we do is we make so many recommendations. We have a committee in Parliament called Implementation Committee. I'm sure Bill knows it because he has been a member of Parliament. He knows it. This is the committee supposed to take up these issues after Parliament makes resolutions. But you find we make resolutions, they remain in the books. So at the end of the day, it's waste of public resources, it is waste of time. But now coming to your question, you know, anytime you push tax to an equipment, and then we are talking about medical equipment.
Yeah, lab products.
What you're saying automatically, the price of that item will go up. So that is a simple statement that increased tax, the price is supposed to go up. Because what would happen, the import of that particular product or item must be able to push that cost. That becomes a cost of importation. So that once it lands here, then you should be able to push that cost to the consumer. In this case, who is the consumer? The consumer are the patients who will be now benefiting from that particular equipment, which means the cost of health care at that level will have to go up. And I think we all know what is happening in the health sector. If there is a sector going through challenges in this country, it's the health sector. All the way from the staff, all the way from the services themselves. And I think any right-thinking Kenyan should be able to do all what it takes to make sure that we don't increase the cost of providing health care in this country.
Okay. And below, what then happens before I go to the provost here? Because from Parliament, responsibility must lie somewhere. Are we looking at the possibility of institutional failure as well on the other part?
The biggest failure in this country is public finance management, Treasury. Because if you look at the Public Finance Management Act, it gives treasuries wide powers to, they are listed so many penalties, you know, and so it's Treasury. Most of the recommendations that are done, the Public Accounts Committee or any of the finance committees of Parliament, goes to Treasury. They're the ones who have the responsibility, and the Treasury says it's the custodian of public resources. They're the ones who need to take action, and by and large they don't, and it's because of political expediency. But I want to say also Parliament, it can sanction, for example, the CS Treasury for failing to take action, or a particular accounting officer. They have that power that, look, you paid for Raka money and you're supposed to refund because it has not been approved and Parliament has rejected it. So if you don't get it refunded, then you get sanctioned, and Parliament also has that power. So I think these two institutions, more than any other, and particularly Treasury, has, you know, if you look at the recommendations adopted by Parliament for action by Treasury, it's shocking, really, and it's all the years. They rarely, and because of, and I think Parliament, I must say this, that Parliament, because of also their own political expediency, Parliament has got other interests sometimes, so no action is taken on Treasury. But that is an institution that you can actually punish easily, because every year they're there for budget, every year they're for one thing or the other thing. Okay. So I think that's where the...
And the power of the purse that the Constitution guarantees to the National Assembly.
But we must underline the word Parliament. Which Parliament? Because he's not talking about... he's talking about an ideal Parliament.
Yes. it ought to be ideal under the Constitution.
Yeah. Okay. And Provost, I'll play again this soundbite from Madam Nyakango during the same session. And this is what she said on borrowing, which caught the attention of the committee members on Friday.
We are only borrowing because we are not looking after what we borrow in a sound manner. Because when we pay commitment fees, it is like opening the window and throwing the money out, because it's not giving us any value at all. So can we reduce the bleeding? Because if we reduce the bleeding, it means we can do more with what we have, and then we don't have to borrow as much.
And then she tied it up to the question of deficit, that we can manage ourselves well and loosen or lessen the budget deficits that are year in, year out in the financial years, and then the question of borrowing there.
Absolutely, and the question of borrowing brings in the public interest around even the projects that are intended to be funded by the borrowed money. Seldom do we get clarity on what is the status of these projects that were funded by borrowed money, and were they completed? But most importantly, how beneficial and impactful are they to the lives of Kenyans? And so in this process, Ayub, that is a concern for the public, who we represent in many different ways, whether it's construction of roads, whether it's in, putting in whichever project. Can we tie that to the impact it makes on the person at the grassroots, and how does that turn their lives around? But Nyakango is very, very spot on that you cannot be borrowing, then at home you are spending carelessly. Excuse that expression. You're spending carelessly. There must be, as Honorable Mark did say very clearly, and I think even a Member of Parliament for Kitui Central did mention, clear measures on how to tame our appetite for money. You look at the high-end vehicles that state officers drive. You look at luxurious accommodation that state officers enjoy. Not that they shouldn't live in luxurious places. You look at money spent, even locally, in conferences. I was present when the President was opening last year the new Parliament buildings. And one of the assurances that was given to the public is that this new Parliament building has offices, has top-notch conferencing facilities, and therefore you don't need to go to White Sands Hotel in Mombasa to gobble millions of shillings in the name of a committee writing a report or in the name of conferencing. And so those are what Nyakango is saying, that if we can tame what we have locally, then a lot of disposable resources would be available to address other issues, including, Ayub, the whole concept of hunger, because you know, we are not just talking about this here, but I wish the members of Parliament would take this as a serious concern. The Integrated Food Security report that was released in March did say that between March and February and March, 2.2 million Kenyans faced the threat of hunger and starvation because of lack of food. And why is this? Because resources that are available that should be channeled to the grassroots to enable people who cannot afford a decent meal is not going there. We see those ones. One person donating 20 million shillings to one institution in the name of wooing their perception. And I think from where I sit, there must be a sense of prudence, but we must also be bold enough to call out people to responsibility, as Honorable Bilo has said, in terms of just managing resources that we have. But budget, I mean, the issue of debt, yes. We must put our finger on it and ask, what has it done to our people?
Yeah, and Honorable Mark Nyamita, this is again another very glaring problem that can be arrested, is it pointed out by the Controller of Budget, and she keeps on bringing this up before Parliament, where you and Honorable Makali Mulu sit. What are the expected outcomes from Parliament on some of these recommendations that these honourable ladies are presenting before you guys?
You know, for example, when Honorable Nyakango says that money was irregularly spent under Article 223, because, you know, Article 223 specifies even the measure of what qualifies to be spent under that. So when Parliament rejects, for example, the payment for Waraka land, we say that a particular officer did not then follow the law in actually paying it. So other arms of government, other institutions, for example, the EACC,
DPP.
The DPP should actually move to prosecute. Because then if I am an accounting officer and we went through a budgeting process, then tomorrow I pay 2 billion shillings for tea, and I pay it under Article 223, it doesn't qualify as an emergency, it doesn't qualify as something that cannot wait, it doesn't meet the thresholds as specified, as laid out under Article 223. And Parliament refuses to approve that payment, in itself is irregular. We do not have prosecutorial powers. So DPP needs to move with speed to arrest the officer who actually did that. So like Makali Mulu says, you know, the Ruaraka land, we did, the compensation for the telecom was actually rejected in Parliament. Maybe now Parliament needs to call the DPP, the EACC, to try and find out why haven't they taken action on some of these issues. Because until action is actually taken, then officers who are charged with that responsibility will be able to do it. But, you know, our hands are tied, like I said. Any expenditure under Article 223, Parliament as a whole becomes morticians. We are basically talking about money that has gone. So we are only saying, did it go the right way? But the money is actually gone. So that's the thing. But let me say something about one of the other things she mentions about commitment fees.
Yes.
It also speaks to proper planning from government. When we plan long-term and we identify projects that are actually to be funded by external partners, and maybe we seek loans or otherwise, and if we don't have a consistent planning and say, okay, we're going to do road A, we're going to do infrastructure B, like that, and stick to that particular plan, if we don't have such a plan, that's where we will have commitment fees. We'll find ourselves continuing to pay commitment fees for projects that never take off. Why? Because today we are saying we're going to construct a hospital in Kitui. And this hospital, we are partnered with a development partner who's agreed to lend us a certain amount. We pay the commitment fees. Then tomorrow, priority has moved from construction of that hospital in Kitui, and now we are saying we are doing a road in Uriri. Then we move. We get another development partner, but you know, you're paying the commitment fees. So you see over 4 years, they've paid almost about 6 billion shillings, which is money in itself that would have done even a road, which money in itself would have done even much more other things. So one is we need to stick to a plan that we follow to the latter. Talking about healthcare, which...
And what does that reveal about the plannings and the workings by government? Because also Dr. Gathongo pointed the same out 2 days before, Dr. Nyakango, saying that some project agreements have clauses that attract commitment fees for any undrawn amounts leading to wastage of public funds. Here we just talked about mathematically some 15 billion. The bill seeks to raise about 40 billion.
Yeah,
that's almost...
Yeah. So I think that... and as she said, this is over the last, over the last 4 years, cutting across cutting across the two regimes. We just need to learn, try and strengthen, and I think this calls also for Treasury to make public all the agreements that they actually are going to go into. To make public. So if you're going to get into an agreement to do a particular project whereby you're getting a development partner to help you fund it, it needs to come out public. Where we are paying for commitment fees even for monies that we have not drawn. It's as good as, going to get a loan from the bank. You haven't been given that money, and you're actually doing it. In fact, Ayub, let me add, that particular practice is also happening. In fact, there's a bill coming up soon, even in the banking sector. When they do digital lending, if you borrow 10,000 shillings, the effective money that actually comes to you is less than 10,000 shillings. Because they take their interest up front, they take their commitment fees up front. It is actually a terrible practice. But I think from as part of this discussion we are saying is, let them make them public. And they need to learn that we cannot be paying commitment fees for money that we have actually not got. I wanted to say something about healthcare and the movement of items from...
Yes, in the bill as proposed.
In the bill as proposed. First, let's also appreciate that for us to sort out the issues in health, let us move whatever relates to health to the respective governments that are actually handling them. There is no need of national government paying for workers who are being supervised by the counties.
Exactly.
That is the first thing. And I think that's a position that we will be trying to persuade even our colleagues in Parliament to ensure that if UHC staff are actually being supervised by governors, there is absolutely no reason for their payroll to be held at the Ministry of Health.
It's a devolved function.
Because how do I pay someone I cannot supervise? So that money needs to actually move to that. Yes. But in the health sector, we also must appreciate that a few good things are also happening in there. For example, SHA has begun to work. And I don't know what my provost would say, but it has begun to work. The feedback we get from the ground, it is actually working. And we also expect, let's also have a country that speaks to the things that are working positively, we encourage. The ones that are not working, we also speak to them.
Point them out.
That is when we are going to have we're going to build a good nation. Okay.
Yes, Honorable Makali, before example, the feedback comes
I just wanted to comment on this commitment fee.
Yeah.
And just to put it into context, if you look at the papers, they are saying 6.7 billion was paid in 4 years. That is for money which you have signed for, but we are not drawing. And if you look at some of the projects, because the Auditor General has listed the projects, I just want to read one of the projects and you see what it will do to this country. One of the projects called the Multinational Horn of Africa Isiolo Madeira Corridor, El Waklam Road, which was supposed to be upgraded.
Yes.
It had only drawn 16.5 billion, which was 0.07 of the money provided. So the money look at that road and where it is. Imagine if we drew all the money and did that road to completion. What would we have done to northeastern part of this country? It would have opened a whole region with a lot of economic activities coming up. And that's where, this is where we're saying the problem we have, and I think really seriously we need Kenyans who are very patriotic. The problem is you sign for a loan and you are not prepared to use the money. Why are you not prepared? In some cases, feasibility studies have not been completed. In some cases, they have not even identified the authorizing officer for that particular loan, the person who will be in charge of the loan. Very basic administrative issues. Which should be done before you sign for a loan. And that's what we're saying, is the cash for nature in which we take these loans. You know, we assume since people are there to give us money, we just go sit, sign, and take, the money is there. If you don't, the other time, because I used to be the first chair of this committee, there is a loan which was signed 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And the reason the loan was not being drawn is because the Minister of Agriculture had not identified an officer who should be called an authorizing officer so that when he signs, the money can be drawn from the World Bank. Now you ask yourselves, 10 years. And this thing is in the treasury books. Every year they report on this loan that is not being used. This is what we are calling bad manners. And I think really, if we want to push this country to the next level, some of these basics, you must get them right. It is not nuclear science, I'm telling you. It's not nuclear science.
And the impact there you have mentioned of the road. Provost, I'll come to you. Final one.
No, I want to just correct my friend Mkulu that it is not because of the casual nature. It's deliberate most of the time. and like I wanted this one of Northeastern, this road.
Yeah, this road.
That thing was signed by the government in 2020.
Imagine.
The World Bank. That was the effective debt. But Uhuru and company did not want to touch it. They didn't want to bother with that part of the world. So I think some of it is political expediency. People just don't think, some officers in government do not think this particular project should not proceed. But I think one of the ways in which they can also resolve this thing is when they are doing this agreement, when they're signing the contract, they need to give a reasonable expectation of when that, they will be ready to get started, to start drawing, so that then they can factor that into and avoid, unnecessary long time. But most of it is because of pure, failure by those institutions to do the work, because of sometimes a simple thing like that is not because of cash, it's because nobody, that officer, that ministry, has someone who is qualified to do that work, but they don't want it because of political expediency. You want somebody else. So you don't want to appoint this person, and so things will keep on. So that's why they need to be penalized.
Yes, Professor. I'll allow you to give the final word to the man of God.
There's a final word.
Yes.
Or as we close on, I agree with Mark. My office has so many people work to it, and especially the underprivileged Kenyans. Several of them have come to me and they say, if it was not for SHA, then my relative would have died. And so to a greater extent, I agree with Mark that from the testimonies that I get, SHA is working. What we only need to do, that the Ministry of Health needs to do, is to make the process more efficient and disbursement of monies, especially to hospitals that are owed monies, are more efficient. My last word goes to members of Parliament, and especially Honorable Makali, who sits in the Budget Committee. If you analyzed the budget, you realize that most ministries, departments, and authorities have not provision for pending bills. Some presented their lump sums and all that, but pending bills remains one of the sicknesses in the economy of this country. For example, hospitals alone are owed 30 billion from the defunct SHA. What does that mean? It means that a hospital is not able to pay its consultants, is not able to buy drugs and all that. Then we are crippling basically the industries in that level. I want to ask that we push ministries, departments, and authorities to ensure that pending bills are not politicized, because that's what's happening today. Heavily politicized.
Thank you.
And therefore we will not pay.
Asante Canon. Allow us to sample the feedback as well here. Gentlemen, here is what you are saying on X, formerly Twitter. The hashtag is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. Babu Michael says, watching Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire narrate what happened to them while in Tanzania left me heartbroken. Every human being with a concerns should condemn this first before saying anything else. You don't do that to a fellow human being. Bob Otieno Weno says, abduction of Kenyan activists with a Ugandan lady in Tanzania. It seems there was a collaboration from both government side, because there was no condemnation from their respective countries, and shows regionally we are ruled by dictators. Mark_Rumors says, it's deeply distressing to watch Boniface Mwangi and Atuhaire narrate their painful ordeal while in Tanzania we're experiencing declining democratic space and serious violation of human rights in the East African community. Frank Orinde says, no matter how well we budget, it means nothing if the national government keeps spending outside the plan. Lack of fiscal discipline and rampant corruption turns budgets into wish lists, not roadmaps. Accountability must match allocation. Parliament must oversight the executive. Lekishon Laban says, if 2025 6th Finance Bill doesn't meet the basic needs of Kenyans, opposing it should not be criminalized. The government must not arrest those offering civic education. Kenyans have every right to scrutinize, question, and reject the bill again if it doesn't serve them. Kiteki Michael says, a budget mainly tells us what we can't afford, but the government keep on forcing anything they want down our throats. A budget should reflect the values and priorities of our nation and its people in a scale of preference. I want to thank you, gentlemen. We are out of time. 5 minutes past the hour. Many thanks, Provost Evans Omolo. Thanks for your time. Honorable Makali Mulu, much appreciated. Honorable Mark Nyamita, much appreciated. Honorable Bill Okero, much appreciated. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. Up next is Social Hour, and we'll see you tomorrow morning here at the same time here on Daybreak. Till then, good morning.